Being recorded. Being recorded. Being recorded. Being recorded. Being recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the, January 10th, 2023 meeting of the Denver Landmark Preservation Commission. I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Let's begin with introductions of the commissioners. Erica, get started.
Hi, I'm Erica Warzel. I'm an architectural historian and preservation consultant nominated by the community at large.
Hello, I'm Gary Petrie. I'm an architect, and I was nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
Hello, I'm Julie Johnson. I'm a historic preservation project manager, and I was nominated by the community at large. I'm Kelly Wemple. I'm an architect, and I was nominated by the American Institute of Architects. I'm Brittany Bryant, landmark staff.
Hi, I'm George Dennis, retired law enforcement, nominated by History Colorado.
I'm Ann Wattenberg. I'm an architect nominated by the American Institute of Architects.
And I'm Larry Sykes, an architect nominated by History Colorado.
All right, so we do have one meeting record on the agenda for approval today. Actually, I didn't see it listed on the agenda, but we got an email with the December 20th meeting record. Was it posted to the website?
I don't think so. I didn't even remember sending it, and I apologize.
Oh, well, that's just me. That I
No, I
yeah,
have.
okay.
I think that last time, and I'll follow up with Jen maybe, but I think that last time it also was not on the agenda and it wasn't posted online. It's something that I just sent to you directly and then you adopt and then it goes on the website after you've adopted.
Yeah, it's normally not online. It's normally attached to the email.
Okay.
And it was attached to the email, so I assume even though it's not on the agenda, you'd like us to do those, correct? Yes, great. Okay, so, the December 20th, meeting record was sent to us. So were there any comments by commissioners? If not, would someone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll move to accept the meeting notes from our last meeting as suggested.
Thank you, Julie. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Gary. I will call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Great. Motion passes and those, that meeting record is accepted. All right. Next on the agenda, we like to reserve time at the beginning of every Landmark Preservation Commission meeting for public comments. Great. So up on the screen are the ways to comment. If you're joining us by computer, you can use the hand raise button in Zoom. If you're joining us by phone, please dial *9, and that's going to raise your hand so we know to call on you. This is a public comment period, not for any project that we're going to be seeing under the hearings or design review agenda today, because there will be separate public comment periods for those. This is if you have any comments about preservation matters in general. So is there anyone on the line who would like to provide a comment? Yep. All right. Then moving forward, we do have, before we go to the consent agenda, there are some audio tips up. So if you're having any trouble hearing us, we do recommend you go to the audio settings. There's an additional menu where you can add a background noise suppression. We found that helps with us kind of rustling papers or anything like that so that you can hear us better. For presenters or commenters, when it's your turn to speak, we'll go ahead and let you know when to unmute, and you'll be able to do that. You can change your settings for speaker and microphone devices in the menu in Zoom. And just contact us if you have any audio challenges. Great. We do have 4 projects on the consent agenda today. Commissioners, have any questions for staff? Thinking with the law concerns? If not, would someone make a motion?
You make the motion. Madam Chair, I move to approve the following items on the consent agenda Application number 2021 COA-333 at 3030 Newton Street. Application 2021 COA-456 at 300 Marion Street. Application number 2021 TAXC-006 at 1928 East 14th Avenue. And application number 2022 TAXC-013 at 650 Walk.
Second. George? All right, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Stayed? Right, motion passes unanimously. So if you're on the line for one of the projects on the consent agenda, your project has been approved and you're free to hop off unless you'd like to listen to the other projects on our agenda today. All right, so we do have one public hearing today. So up on the screen is the hearing process. I'll go ahead and announce the project. Staff will introduce the application and provide their recommendation. After which we'll hear from the applicant. You'll have up to 10 minutes to present, and then we'll open it up for public comments. So public comment periods for hearings are 3 minutes per person. And once we've heard from all commenters, I'll go ahead and close the hearing, and the commission will move into deliberation and make a vote. So the first project we have, or the only hearing we have today, is 2022-LM Demo-452, which is at 155 Humboldt Street. So I'll go ahead and open the hearing.
Hi, we're trying to get the video to work. Turn it on, and it's not showing up.
It is showing up, it's not showing you yourself, if that makes any sense. If you go to the view up in the corner, there should be something about like hide self-view or show self-view.
But why is that showing up?
This is a mirror of my computer,
Okay,
which is
there we
not the same. This is what the Zoom meeting looks like for attendees right now, which is correct.
Okay, great. Okay,
All right.
thank you, everyone. Sorry about that. A little different every meeting. Still figuring this out. Okay. I'll see if it will let me move forward. Look at those arrows.
John always does that part. so I don't know how to do it.
I've shared it. He shared it. It says I can control it. It just takes a minute.
There's usually, sorry, everybody, we're working through some tech issues.
There's usually the arrows here. So meeting control. Yeah. it didn't show the arrows.
Oh, that was working.
Okay.
The up-down arrows today, y'all.
Great. Apologies for the technical issues. Thank you, everyone. So this is a public hearing for 155 Humboldt Street. This project is being brought to the commission for a public hearing due to the extent of demolition proposed in conjunction with a proposed construction of a rooftop and two-story rear addition. This application is only for the proposed demolition. If the demolition is approved following the public hearing, then the design review of the proposed addition will follow. Projects that trigger a public hearing include demolition of any portion of a facade or feature facing a public street, demolition of 40% or more of the square footage of a structure's exterior wall surfaces, demolition of 40% or more of the historic roof structure, or a combined demolition of 40% or more of the square footage of the wall surfaces and the historic roof area. For this application, the applicant is proposing to demolish portions of the facade in order to return it to what is believed to be a more historic configuration, to demolish more than 40% of the roof, and to demolish more than 40% of the exterior wall surface on the west side. 155 Humboldt Street, as you see here on the slide, is a contributing building in the Country Club Historic District. Constructed in 1926, the house is a good example of the Mediterranean revival style. The district application and ordinance do not specifically list contributing properties to this district, but the house does fall within the period of significance established in the country club guidelines, which is 1902 to 1945. Additionally, the National Register nomination for the Country Club Historic District includes 155 Humboldt in its list of buildings contributing to the character of the district, providing the following description. Uslander House, 1926, one-story Mediterranean-style bungalow. Some alterations have been made to the entrances and fenestrations as described in the submitted application, but staff do not find these to significantly impact the overall historic character of the property or its ability to contribute to the district. So staff would recommend that you consider this a contributing property. I got it. So here you see on the left is an aerial view showing houses that exist today. On the upper right is a view of the site plan, and then on the lower right is an image of the historic Sanborn map. So this Sanborn map is from 1929, so just a few years after the construction of the house. So this is likely the original footprint of the house. And you can see here really limited modifications. The overall footprint is pretty much the same. It includes the main house and then an attached garage that is located at the upper left side of the house. You see that original attached garage there marked with an A, part of the dwelling. You'll see there on the facade marked in red that the applicant is showing there have been some modifications to the entry. So that's showing that kind of small modification there, but that appears to be the only real modification to the original footprint of the house. So this is showing then the south side of the house. This is one of the areas that staff is most concerned about the demolition. Much of the left portion of this facade is proposed for demolition, and staff is concerned with an extensive amount of demolition on a side facade. Often, the MARC guidelines do provide more flexibility to the rear of the property, but this is also including a substantial amount, we feel, of side demolition. Here's some examples then showing you the general site setting. There is this kind of structure off to the south of the property on the side of the lot. Appears that most of this is not historic. There is also a lot of site work leading up to the house as well. There's this front pathway, this stucco gates surrounding a large courtyard. This is all proposed for demolition, but it's unclear whether or not this path or the front patio are any of these site walls, if any of these are historic. This isn't really addressed in the application, but they are covered. They are also being proposed for demolition. So here just to show you that site with yellow is the various site features proposed for demolition, and then also that all that area down on the lower left that's proposed for demolition as well. So here you see the proposed roof demolition. So this includes the demolition. You see the garage demolition up there top. The garage was not included in the demolition percentages because often we don't consider garages to be contributing structures. However, in this case, since it is part of the original footprint of the building, the commission may want to decide, think whether or not that garage should be considered as part of the original structure. So you see here the proposed demolition, main section, and then a section of kind of in the front that's proposed for demolition as well for the construction of a new stair. So here you see the proposed demolition on the facade, so altering this kind of the one area that you saw on the site plan that had been altered previously, and then that section, the outbuilding kind of sets back. So on the facade, non-original doors and windows will be removed, as well as the stair addition, a total of about 67 square feet. So here you see the rear. So The historic attached garage will be demolished, most of the rear wall, the windows, doors, totaling about 396 square feet or 67% of the rear, not including the garage. Then on the north, we'll have the demolition of windows and the front, part of the front stair addition there, as well as the garage, not included in the total, so just including the windows in the front stair addition, that's about 61 square feet of demolition. And then here's the south side, which I'd shown the photo of earlier. This is one of the sides where staff is particularly concerned about the amount of wall demolition. So here, a portion of the wall and the parapet will be demolished along with windows and doors. So excluding the garage, this 325 square feet of demolition are about 35% of that side of the south side of the original house. So staff is very concerned with the extent of the proposed demolition. Staff believes that the proposed demolition would significantly alter the historic character of the property and result in a loss of integrity that would impact the ability of the property to contribute to the historic district. Staff is recommending denial based on the following guidelines. 2.58B preserve the essential form and integrity of historic buildings, and 2.58B, avoid demolitions that change the overall appearance, massing, and volume of the historic building. More than 40% of a contributing building within a historic district is being proposed for demolition. Due to the extent of wall in this demo, the staff find that the essential form and integrity of the historic building will be lost. We also find the proposed project does not meet guideline 3.5. Do not damage historic building fabric or obscure characterizing features when building an addition. A, minimize the removal of original building fabric, and B, design an addition so it can be removed without destroying original materials. So the proposed plans we find do not minimize demolition. The extent of the proposed demolition will severely impact the historic character. Significant amount of historic fabric is proposed for removal. 9% of the east elevation, 67% of the west, 35% of the south, 6% of the north, and 66% of the roof. Due to the extent of demolition, especially on the exterior wall surface, it would be very difficult to return the house to its original appearance. This project was referred to the Country Club Historic Neighborhood Architecture Review Committee. The committee met on October 27th to review the proposal. A letter is included in the packet from them. The committee did not specifically address the proposed demolition, but they did recommend approval of the proposed addition.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
I have a question, Abby, and maybe I should know this. Is there a difference when you're calculating the amount of demolition between original material and, historic and not historic?
Yeah, I mean, typically when we are working with an applicant to do an application, we have them do those differently. So if they're demolishing non-historic materials, those don't count towards the demolition total. So if somebody was demolishing an entire, later addition, those would not count towards the roof demolition totals or the wall total. In this case, because it's a garage, but it is original, there's a little bit more unclear there whether or not that should be included in the historic demolition totals.
And is it the same as for windows? If they're whether you're demolishing an historic window or a replacement window, the numbers all go together. It's all part of the same. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Maybe I wasn't paying attention when I should or not. Were the alterations to the original architecture, were they identified in the application as to when they occurred? And did that occur within a period of significance?
You can ask the applicant. I can't remember when they occurred. The applicant does outline kind of some of the investigations that they did to determine where the floor levels have been changed and additions had been made, and they do have photos of their investigations, but I do not remember offhand what the date, if there was a date included for those.
All right, if there are no other questions, let's go ahead and hear from the applicant. So,
I just sent them the invite.
all right. So,
Okay, well then, yeah, maybe he's filling in.
all right.
I was told it was gonna be John.
Mark, you've been promoted. You can go ahead and unmute yourself when you're ready. Please start with your name and address for the record. You have up to 10 minutes to present.
Hi, John Mattingly, 517 East Bayard, Denver, 80209. Thanks for being here today. This is easily the most interesting thing that's ever been put in front of me. I'd like to just preface that from a demo calc perspective, this was such a tricky one because there's did you guys lose me? Can I
No,
be heard?
we've got you. We're just setting a timer real quick. We want to get that going.
You can also turn your
Okay.
camera on if you want to.
And you can turn your camera on if you want to. You don't have to.
Okay.
There you go.
I drank all that liquor in the bar during this process that you can see. In the event, what was interesting about this is we thought about not including any of the demolition on what I'm going to refer to as the landmark contributing structure of this building, which is the front mass of the building that you can see in the footprint, like on sheet L033. And in this elevation that we're staring at right now, that is in white, that where the highest parapet wall is, that in typical bungalow format is this front street facing volume. And the area behind it that we're proposing as demolition is set back considerably from that facade and is entirely unperceptible at any point on the street. And so how it's contributing to the landmark context, I don't know, because you can't see it. And so, but that being said, the front wall, the window changes that were questioned, at what time were they moved? I don't really know. We have no evidence of that. And the window replacements, for example, there are some in there that are aluminum clad and vinyl. But what I was trying to figure out was, it's such a complex ask. Should we leave all that out for the moment and just disregard it? Because the real meat and potatoes about this project is the more larger scale demolition that we're proposing, which is that large square volume that lives behind the primary contributing structure. And on this sheet, what you're seeing is that front rectangular mass is that parapet volume that is presented to the street. The parapet walls on that structure are taller than the ones behind it. And typical to what you would find in many bungalows, where you have, if it's an English cottage style bungalow, you're going to see a steep pitch on that front volume, and then it goes to a very broad low pitch in the back, which is the area that was neglected from an architectural perspective. This bungalow is no different. So you can see there in our shaded area that area back there, because of the setbacks of that primary volume, is widely unseen from the street in any direction. The area to the south simply can't be seen at all. And the area to the north, because the neighboring property is such a large property, you do get a glimpse of that, which you can see on my sheets L011 and L012. Those particular views were done in Revit as real-time elevation from street at somebody that would be 5'10" looking at the building. So those elevations are real-time of a person standing in the street seeing this project. And so the design approach here was to completely contain and restore what we consider the contributing volume to the street text, which is exactly what we've done by not touching that front rectangular piece, except for those weird stairs that were added, because those were not original as seen from the Sanborn map. And just a brief history, there's a stage in the main living room where the floor was raised about 14 inches. It's like 3 brick courses that I uncovered by taking the plaster off, and it raised in the basement as well. And there was a staircase that goes down. So it was almost like there were 2 chapels in this house. And then the windows were raised. I don't know. So that much we're not as worried about. It's just that if we're going to be wrenching on this thing, the idea was to bring it back to what it was before. And that's through that investigation of all the varying window heights. That's what we concluded, is at one point, those windows would have all been on the same plane. The floors would have been the same. So the idea was just to bring it back. But the meat and potatoes about this hearing is really the area behind what I'm calling the contributing structure. And I think from a landmark definition, that's what it would be called, because that's what's creating the historic context from the street. And our design in removing what's behind it preserves that. And luckily that building has a parapet wall that's almost 20 feet tall. And so it allowed us to create an addition behind this that preserves that entirely, and that is entirely unperceptible from the street also, which you can see in my L011 and L012. The image on the top is the existing structure that's there, including everything behind it, which can't be seen in this view at the far corner of the property. You can see what we're proposing behind it. And so that's where the addition is most visible, but it sits completely behind and is only 2.5 feet taller than the parapet on this main building. And so that's for later review, should we get past this the demo application. But I have to admit that when I was considering this, I didn't really think of the 40% rule, because the area that we were talking about was already set behind that primary volume, which was, when this building was designed, that was the general intent back then. As you present this thing to the street, and what happens behind it isn't relevant. And that's pretty much the case here. The detailing, everything on those side gables or on the side parapet walls, the height of them is all diminished behind this volume, which keeps you from seeing it. For the alley view of our demo, you can also see that the parapet of that front contributing structure is considerably higher than what's behind it. And so I think that when this was designed, it was done in that typical bungalow format, where you take the front formal volume and articulate the architectural style with that, and then the rest of it falls off. And so the real challenge here was to do something that respected that volume. And we're doing that, because what you're not seeing in this particular image, the second story addition sets back 5 feet on the north from that existing wall. So that entire wall that you're seeing on sheet L012 stays. And in fact, in that image, you can see our addition barely behind it. And so I just think that what's tricky, and what Abigail and staff had to deal with, was how do you apply rules to something like this that lives here on this large lot amongst much larger scale houses, and it's a single story. And so that's the other complicated matter, is the demo of the roof areas, because we're putting a roof on it. If this was a 2-story building already, then this addition I could easily subordinate behind it because of the height. In this particular case, the way we subordinated it was to keep it completely behind this primary volume and make the detailing inferior. So that's sort of the history of this thing in a nutshell. And I do think it's very complicated because of the nature of it, the garage being attached, and the amount of demo that we're proposing. But really, the contributing volume is this area in the front, and I think that's clearly depicted in our images, not only on the cover of this page, but in the historic photographs that Abigail had shown, where you're seeing the side of the house. You can't see that from any point on the street anywhere, not from the neighbor's yard, not from anywhere. And so, but what you can see is this primary volume, and we've preserved that. So the rest of it, the front porch area, when were those things moved? I don't know. I'd be happy to deal with those at another time and try to figure that out, but there's not a lot of information to be found on this house other than what Abigail dug up. And so I think it'd be a better house if we were able to put it back where it was in the front, because it does make sense where all those things are in alignment. But the meat and potatoes here is really the area in the rear that we're talking about removing, so that we can restore this thing and put together what I think is a very humble addition, all things considered, the amount of open space we're preserving on that site. Which I'd also like to add that we do have letters of support from every surrounding neighbor, from the alley behind us, 2 neighbors behind us on the alley, the neighbor to the north, the neighbor to the south, and the 2 neighbors across the street, all have submitted letters of support for this project that we turned in on Friday. So they weren't part of this package, but Abigail does have those. And the Country Club Neighborhood Association, their CCHN, I should say, we had a fun review with them as well, and had a unanimous decision in favor of this, simply due to the fact that we're preserving what can be seen and not diminishing that. So that's the history of it. Hopefully that shines some light on I need another 2 hours to explain the history of this thing, but we don't have it. So hopefully that was helpful and we can have a good result. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the applicant? And before I open up for questions, I should say that we did receive the letters of support via email, so thank you. We did get those.
Thank you.
So any questions for the applicant?
I can't hear anybody.
Great. Well, no one had any questions.
Okay.
So it sounds like everything is very clear. Thank you for your time. Are there any public comments on this project? Please use the hand raise button at this time if you do have a comment. Or dial *9 if you're joining us by phone. Is there anyone listening? Okay, we're the no hands raised? No. All right. So if there's no public comments, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing and let's move into deliberation. Abby, was there any stuff? Okay. No. Great. So again, we're just reviewing the demolition and not the addition at this time. What are the commissioner's thoughts on how this does or does not meet the guidelines? Not all at once.
Well, I'll go first. When I just reviewed the application without the applicant's presentation, I was inclined to agree with the staff's recommendation. And nothing in the presentation changed my mind about that, because I think what the presentation seemed to imply is that you can determine what makes a building significant after it's already been made. You consider it significant and sort of subtract anything that you don't think it contributes to its significance, which is really not consistent with the spirit of designation, because you designate buildings as a whole. And you also designate buildings as a record of their changes over time. You know, if these changes that were made to the original building occurred outside the period of significance, which I speculate is not likely because they are so sort of sensitive to the original architecture, they'd be considered part of its significance. And the application seems to ignore all that. Maybe a more in-depth investigation of what really happened could change that. But for me, I agree that what's being proposed is seriously subtracts from the integrity of the building.
Thanks, Gary. Nodding heads.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think Gary summed it up nicely, and that kind of not even, we're just talking about the demolition here, that there's a lot of questions that remain unanswered in my mind as to whether how I could consider it appropriate for this historic building. I agree, it looks like it could very well be that these changes occurred at some point during a historic period of significance. Without further information on that, I don't feel comfortable making that call. Thanks. Also,
I think I'm in agreement with you both. I think for me, I think the language the applicant used, contributing, I think maybe it would have been better phrased as character defining. I think he was noting that the front of the home is the character defining feature because it's more prominent, and that the back of the home didn't have as many character defining features because it's a little bit more simplified below the lower parapet. The whole building is contributing. So that kept hanging me up. Like, the whole building is definitely contributing. And so I agree with staff's assessment that, you know, it just doesn't look like the demolition is minimizing the impacts and it's not reversible. I think that it sounds like, yes, the goal was to make the addition subordinate by being completely behind that front or part of a home, which I think is a good strategy. But I am just not convinced that you need to demolish as much as what's shown, especially on the side elevation, in order to achieve that. Any other comments? It sounds like I've seen nodding heads, so I'm guessing we're all on the same page.
Absolutely.
I guess I would also say that there are landscaping features, and the feature in the back, which are not part of the main structure, which are part, as everyone says, part of the contributing nature to this project. And to just wipe them away seems, especially because they are so character defining, especially that piece of the back. I would say it doesn't seem like it's in the spirit of trying to preserve the historic nature of this project, even though I understand it's not actually a building and it's not anything else, but you can see it from the street. And it seems to be character defining.
I agree. I mean, there's so much sort of design intent in everything that was done on this site that is compatible isn't quite the right word. So consistent with the style of the original architecture. And to wipe 80% of that away and save a facade, this seems to be contrary to the intent of the ordinance to preserve buildings intact, and allow those changes that are truly subordinate and don't overly destroy the original integrity.
All right, it sounds like everybody's in agreement. So who would like to make the motion?
I can make the motion. Madam Chair, I move to deny application number 2022-LM Demo-542 for the demolition at 155 Humboldt Street as per design guidelines 2.58, 2.60, 3.5, character defining features for the Country Club Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
I think we need a second before we make a then.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Gary. All right, did you have
I'm
a?
not sure the right application number is,
We're doing the demo rather than.
but the one I'm looking at says
Oh, it's
2023 COA 111.
That's the addition. Isn't that the?
well, this says LM Demo 542.
It says 542 is the 452, which is.
Hold on. Or is that right?
Yeah.
542.
Okay, the agenda says 452.
Sorry,
That's all.
code numbers there, but yeah, the staff report says 542.
Okay.
And that's how you read it. So
Yeah.
it sounds like we should be good then. Is that address your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. All right, if there's no further discussion on the motion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the motion passes unanimously. So you can work with staff to come up with some modifications to meet the guidelines. And that is our only hearing today, so we'll go ahead and move into the design project. Up on the screen, you can see the process. It's very similar to what we just did with the hearings. I'll go ahead and introduce the project. Staff will then introduce the application and provide their recommendation, upon which we'll hear from the applicant, who will have 10 minutes to present, after which we'll open it up for public comments. And public comment periods are 2 minutes per person for design review. So the first item on our agenda was this project. Since the hearing was denied, we will not be seeing the addition for design review because the demolition has to be approved for us to review that. So, so we will not be reviewing 155 Humboldt, and we will first see 2021-COA-455 at 2151 East Hawthorne Place.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll see if I can move it in a second. Okay, so thank you. Yeah, this is 2151 East Hawthorne Place. So this is a project that had been previously reviewed and approved by the commission. And today you're reviewing some revisions that have come back into that application. So the previously approved project included that side addition there that has a garage and an upper story to it that is prominent on the left, as well as dormers, some window and door alterations as well. So the proposed alterations to these plans, including replacing a woodlap siding with a 4-inch exposure with a woodlap siding with a variable width exposure, replacing cast stone sills with red flagstone sills, replacing wood carriage style doors with custom garage doors with irregular vertical deep root boards, adding a new section of sidewall and a new gate at the entrance of the driveway, adding a patio with a fire pit and grill in the side yard, some new exterior lighting, and a change of a window to a door. So while revisions to projects can often be approved by staff administratively, in this case, staff determined that this request needed to go to the commission because we had concerns over whether some of the changes met our landmark design guidelines. Advance it, Brittany.
Yeah.
Okay, so here you have the existing materials. So existing on the house, you do have a wood siding that is rough on and it features variable width. So what the applicant is proposing now is to use a siding that more closely matches this variable width historic siding. You see then to the right are the existing windows in the historic structure. So you see there they have these tile sills, so kind of a really unique feature, not something we see too often, these tile sills, and they're wanting to replicate those tile sills in the historic. So staff has some concerns with this. So I'm going to go to the next image, Brittany. So here you can see just what was approved originally. So in the previous application that came to the commission, simple cast stone sills were approved and a wood siding that was going to have a uniform 4-inch reveal. So in the current application before you, the applicant is proposing to replace that, you see there, with current proposal to replace the cast stone sill with using tile and to replace a standard 4-inch reveal siding with a variable width. So variable width is not shown in that image, but if you read the text, it says to replace it with a variable width siding. So staff feels that replicating these features on the addition would really blur the distinction between the original building and the addition. Because particularly since these are such distinctive features, we have very few buildings that have a regular width siding and tile sills. So these are really distinctive original features, and we feel by putting these on an addition has creating a false sense of history, that it will make it more difficult to distinguish between what is original construction here and what is a later addition. Brittany, can you go to the next? So here's the garage doors. While not quite as much as a concern, we still have some concern here. You can see there the garage doors that were originally approved, kind of standard carriage style doors. They're now proposing garage doors that will be custom made and will also have that variable width. So again, trying to really closely replicate the variable width and kind of the unique, very much kind of fitting within that Tudor storybook style tradition that was really emphasizing hand craftsmanship with things like that variation. And I just feel that that's really starting to blur the lines here between new and historic construction. So if you consider, guideline 3.4, design and addition to be recognized as current construction, we feel that they're just so close that it's not really meeting that guideline. Next slide. Then here's also a site plan to show some of the other changes. So here is You can see the photo, here's the entry drive. So this is where they are proposing to continue that stone wall that brick wall that you see there, and then also add a new gate at the driveway and add a new pedestrian gate as well. And you can see that then on the lower left of the site plan image there. And then if you look at the upper right of the site plan image, you can see there a whole kind of new side patio with an outdoor fireplace and grill. That's set so far back that feels, even though it's in the side yard, that's set so far back that really isn't going to be visible. So we don't have concerns with that, pointing out since that is also part of the changes. But we do have concerns with the proposed design of the new sidewall and gates. Go to the next slide. So there you see at the top kind of the entire length of the sidewall, and then a close up on the kind of new construction part. So they are proposing to build a 5-foot tall, solid brick sidewall. This does not meet the guidelines for Country Club or our general design guidelines. The guidelines for Country Club do say that in the front yard, you should only use a low fence or wall that allows use over it. Tall fences or walls as an excess of 40 inches are inappropriate. And we also have then general guidelines that say walls at the front need to be at least 50% open. However, we also have guidelines that state that you should look at the historic context. In this case, there is an existing 5-foot brick wall that they will be continuing. And there are also other brick walls in the context. However, there are not any other solid gates in this context. So in this case, staff would recommend that the approval of the brick wall is putting the context both on this site and surrounding sites. I'll show a couple images in a moment. But we feel that this solid gate and that solid pedestrian entrance really doesn't meet the guidelines. So we would recommend that gate be redesigned to be at least 50% open, and that pedestrian gate be no more than 5 feet tall and also be designed to be at least 50% open. And Brittany, if you go to the next slide, so you can see here, this kind of Hawthorne Place is a very kind of unique little, area within the Country Club District that really kind of has its own unique character. And as you can see here, there are multiple other properties that also have tall brick sidewalls. So while tall brick sidewalls really aren't a feature of the district as a whole, they are really kind of a district of this little bit of Hawthorne Place. However, street view to go up and down the street, no other properties on Hawthorne Place have any gates or, of any kind. And so, certainly there, in other cases, there's no gates. So I certainly think that if there's going to be a gate here, it should be at least 50% open to kind of retain, at least meet that sense of kind of openness into the property. So staff is recommending approval with conditions. So we would recommend that the wood siding be returned to be uniform in size of 4-inch reveal as originally approved, that the garage door have uniform with board, that the sills be cast stone, or would be some of the materials besides we just don't think it's appropriate for them style, and that we would recommend that the gates be at least 50% open and no taller than 5 feet.
Are there any questions for staff?
After this one is John Mattingly, but
Just repeat
Mark. Okay, sorry, yeah.
Sorry, John appears to be using Mark's account.
That's right. I just wasn't sure if it was the same for all of them. Like all the ones that I think on.
Great. All right, you should be able to unmute yourself when you're ready, and you have up to 10 minutes.
John Mattingly, 517 East Bayard. Thanks again, Abigail. I just covered all my wounds. This is an interesting job as well. We have really great drawings, all the original blueprints from this building are kept and intact, and they're fantastic. It was an architect out of California. And the reason that wall isn't on the other side is it was over budget by, I think, some silly number like $30. But you know, back then the whole house cost $37,000. And so anyway, so there are the original architectural drawings, that wall was continued and returned. And so we were really just putting that back. I understand Abigail's concern about the gate. I think that's reasonable. And so I think the wall kind of speaks for itself. I mean, that whole street is that way, and every property that went in her images have that same wall, and then you enter up to the property. And so, as it relates to the materiality of the siding, it's interesting because the images that were presented that went up there, or maybe the original. If you go to the original images, scroll up a little bit further. Not only is that a rough sawn, but it's actually a live edge. They're not straight. It's a live edge, very heavily rough sawn board. And so what we're proposing is a square edge, what would be called a saw cut. So it's not the rough texture either. And so it is like that and more in spirit of the architecture of the house, but decidedly different. It would be much more stark in its presentation. And it is on the back of the garage where only my client gets to enjoy it, or the neighbor. And so it's not seen from the street, but it still would be decidedly different. What we're proposing in the red flagstone would be, instead of a smooth cut sill, it would be a snap cut red flagstone, just so that it's not so stark in contrast to these the tile. My thought was that if it was a red sandstone snap cut, we'd probably do it in a 2-inch exposure. You wouldn't immediately be drawn to it, but would notice the difference. So I thought that would be a subtlety that would be worth trying to get approved. And then as it relates to the garage doors, those original doors had a very heavy bead on them, you know, the kind of bead profile you don't see today. And so, but we thought it was fun, you know, you don't see those all the time. And those doors were really special, which we covered them up with the breezeway addition. So they're gone now. They're nowhere to be seen. And so these new doors are entirely themselves. And so in the spirit of the architect and all the labor that was put into this building, we thought we would at least try to do something like what the architect intended, but different. And so that's where this profile we came up with was this, which is a simple V-groove and a variable width, and not a bead profile, a heavy bead profile, which it's hard to see because there's so many layers of paint on these other doors. So if the two doors were side by side and those other doors still existed, you would see the difference. The one is way more, fairy tale is a great way to say it, more decorated than what we're proposing. And so we just felt like it deserved, you know, since we had all that data and the house is so beautiful, that we might at least try to do something that's not just off the shelf, like a 4-inch exposure siding and those standard vertical doors. I think they're nice, but I feel like we're still meeting the guidelines by being decidedly different from what's there in what we're presenting here. And we've just had time to kind of go through all the drawings and see these things, which is why we're re-proposing it, because it's been a really fun project to play with, just because of the documentation we have from before. So I'm trying to think if I missed anything here. I don't think so. I think that addresses, the fire pit, you know, that's way back off the back of the house. And so I don't know if that was in question or not, but I thought it was nice to do a pit versus a big towering fireplace. And so that was a conscious decision between me and the clients, was to do something that gets them outside in a patio environment that doesn't create a big, you know, call attention to itself in the side yard. So that's why we were proposing a lower fire pit as opposed to a tall built fireplace. So I think that covers everything there. So I appreciate you guys looking at this again, and thanks for your help.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? So I just want to clarify, make sure I heard this right. So the siding you're proposing, the existing has a live edge, and you're proposing the new have a straight edge, right?
Correct.
So is the new, okay, and is the new rough sawn as well, or was that
No, it's called saw cut, so it's not rough and fuzzy. It kind of has like kerf marks on it barely, but it's not that the wood that's there now is very textural, very heavy, rough cut wood. And this, we're proposing a not an S4S, but what we call a saw cut.
Okay. And can you clarify again what the sills, you think they'd be distinguishable as different from the existing? Because I wasn't sure I was understanding.
Well,
That they'd be stacked.
the sills that are there now are a tile. They're a smooth, hard glazed, polished tile, which is in heavy contrast to the clinker bricks that are on the house. And what we're proposing is a red sandstone, which is a porous stone and dull, and it would actually be a solid stone with a smaller, like 2-inch exposure, but it would still be a stone sill like the one you're seeing on the left of this image, but it would be in red sandstone instead of buff.
Okay.
We think what's crazy is you don't see this anywhere. It's right above the garage door. It's relevant, but it would just be kind of like a ping, it would be a little bit more aggressive in the buff because it's going to be starkly different than what's there in the tile. And we thought that the color tone of the red flagstone would be a better fit and settle in easier.
And have you considered a cast stone that's just a similar color?
Well, you're not going to cast stone is going to be more glazed like the tile that's there. So the texture of this sandstone is going to be softer like the brick and considerably different, in contrast to the glazed tiles that are on the other sills. I mean, they're polished, and what we're proposing isn't. It's just in that color family, and it's also a rough cut face, as you can see, that snap cut stone face. Whereas our tiles they're polished and smooth.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I guess maybe, I think you alluded to this, but can you explain again sort of your thought process in changing these materials from the ones that were approved? What caused?
Well, there's a lot to consider when you're designing something like this. And so my first task was to get the building form right and materiality of it accurate. And, it's a complicated review. And so the materiality that we chose was simple, easily approvable, for what it's doing. But the more we've been involved in the project and the drawings that we've seen, we just felt like, and when you're taking those old doors off and we saw them, we're like, wow, these are really cool. What if we did something like it, but that's decidedly different just to honor that, so we've just gotten to know the house better. That's really all there is to it. And I've never seen such great blueprints. I mean, they're amazing. And like letter correspondence between the architect and the homeowner and the builder, it's really cool. And so I think we were just trying to, give it what it deserves, really. And we had more time to think about it.
Thank you. Abby, did you?
I just staff recap.
Oh,
All right.
All right. Are there any other questions for the applicant? All right. Thank you for your time, John.
Thank you.
Okay.
Right. We'll open it up for public comments. Is there anyone who'd like to provide a comment on this project? Please use the hand raise button at this time. No comments. So yeah, Abby, you had some recap.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, the applicant presentation really provided a lot of additional description of the materials that wasn't available in the application. And so I just encourage you, as you're considering this, that we may need to ask for additional information in the application, because the images that we saw on the screen were pretty much all the material detail that was provided for like the sills and the garage door and the siding. So depending on where you go with your deliberation, would just encourage maybe requesting some additional detail on materials to reflect kind of what was discussed in the in the applicant presentation.
Even though testimony is part of it, just getting that in record.
Well, if you're going to set, like if you're going to approve whether, because we have to have stamped plans and we have to have, so if you're going to approve things based on the testimony today, we would really also need that to be reflected in application materials.
And I do have another question for you. So I feel like Country Club Historic District is kind of unique to other districts where we see a lot more, let's say, replicative design based on the fact that they have their own design guidelines that are separate from the Denver guidelines. So does that change any way that you see these materials that were presented today?
I mean, to a point, definitely it has reflected some how we do reviews there, but there's nothing specific in the guidelines as relate to additions. The country club guidelines really only have one guideline that addresses additions, and that's kind of maintaining open space and side yards. They don't really have guidelines that specifically address, what the materiality of additional paint should be.
Great. Any other questions for Abby before we move on? All right. What was everybody's thoughts? Okay. We want to go through kind of the conditions. Would that be a good way to kind of talk through these?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Great. So the first proposed staff condition was the siding be uniform in size with 4-inch reveal rather than the varied siding to match the existing. The applicant gave additional testimony to say that they could be differentiated, when you're up close to the material. What was everybody's thoughts on that?
I guess I'm open to what the applicant proposed. So I'd be in favor of eliminating that first condition.
Or asking for clarification?
Yes, well, that would be part of, yeah.
I will say too that, because of where it is on the garage, that it's subtle change that would be enjoyed really by those who are on the properties right up close behind the addition. So that I think just emphasizes that there's some room between using it with original materials.
Sounds like we're all in agreement on that. Okay. And then the garage doors, to have uniform width boards rather than those very big groups that were proposed to kind of honor the historic. What were your thoughts on the garage doors?
If I can jump in, I mean, I found that because they're vertically oriented and that because of how the mass of the new addition is so clearly kind of differentiated from the existing house, it strikes me as there's a bit more room for that to have some allusion to that historic material, but it doesn't seem like it's, I wouldn't call it replicative.
I agree, and I'm glad you brought that up because I do think the connector kind of really does define that this is a new area. Okay, so if that were the case, we probably don't need more information on the garage doors. That condition could just be removed. The sills to be cast stone, and so we learned some more about the sills from the applicant. That these would be red sandstone, 2-inch exposure, not tile, the current art, all the polished glazed tile on the sills.
I love that too.
Yeah.
And again, with asking for more information, to document that.
Yeah. And that could be, one condition, provide, or
I think just one overall condition.
Details and information on the wood siding.
Can I remind y'all to speak up?
Particularly
Yes, and.
These are outdoor voices.
Loud.
Okay, so we're good with the sills. So the last proposed staff condition was that the gates be at least 50% open and no taller than 5
I
feet.
can go along with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I prefer to keep the staff's recommendation there.
Consistent guidelines of the neighborhood. Okay, great. So was there anything outside of the staff conditions that anyone had concerns of and wanted to discuss? like all the other changes. All right, great. Then who is going to take a stab at this revised motion? Or revised and suggested motion?
Madam Chair, I move to approve application number 2021-COA-455, project revisions at 2151 East Hawthorne as per Country Club Design Guidelines C1. Design Guidelines 3.4, 5.2, and 5.5, character defining features for the Country Club Historic District, presented testimonies, submitted documentation and information, provided in the staff report with the following conditions. One, that gates to be at least 50% open and no taller than 5 feet. And two, that additional information be provided concerning the materials proposed.
Great, thank you, Gary.
I second that.
Thanks, Julie, for seconding.
I'd like to make an amendment, a friendly amendment. I think it's time to conditionally approve.
I was wondering about that, if you have to be redundant or not, but I'll accept.
I'll accept it as well.
Okay.
I'd like to make another friendly amendment, just about, as far as proposed materials, I'd also like to say, ask for additional, information about existing materials, so that we, because some of that was, like, say with the sills, it was unclear to me about, the glazed tile, that's the material that we're dealing with, so I think having both of those, existing and proposed materials.
I agree, yes.
Julie? I do. Great. All right, if there's no further discussion on the motion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? All right, motion passes unanimously, and the project is conditionally approved, so you can work with staff to meet those conditions. Okay, the next project up for design review today is 2022-COA-575 at 3426 Elliott Street.
Great, thank you.
You are back. I can control, so let's see.
Okay. So for this project, the applicant is proposing to construct a new tandem house, single-family residence on the existing zone lot for the primary structure at 3424 Elliott Street in the Potter Highlands Historic District. The new address for the new tandem house will be 3426 Elliott Street. Here you can see a Google map on the left showing an aerial view of the property with 3426 Elliott Street outlined in red. That will be located, like I said, behind an existing structure and along an alley. And this is located on the carriage lot block within the Potter. To the right here, you can see existing photos of the site and the existing primary structure at the front of the lot. So here's the site plan where you can see the existing zone lot with the primary structure that's existing at the front of the lot. The new tandem house is 36 feet wide and is proposed to be 2 stories with an attached 2-car garage facing the alley. A new concrete walk from the front sidewalk will also be constructed leading back to the front porch of the new 2-story structure. So here we can see the ground plan comparison study at the top of the slide, showing overall widths of other structures on the block. The new tandem house, like I said, is proposed at 36 feet wide, and the front house is currently at 36 feet 6 inches wide. Other houses on the block range from 38 feet 5 inches wide to 24 feet and 3 inches wide. At the bottom here, you can see the streetscape study showing how the new house design and height fits in with the historic context. The overall height of the new structure is 25 feet 10 inches, and the front primary structure stands at approximately 17 feet tall, making the new house approximately 9 feet taller. The new house will be set back over 69 feet from the front of the street, and nearby structures on the same block space stand at varying heights from 17 feet up to 34 feet. Additionally, the tandem houses and rear structures, structures on carriage lots are common in this district and in the surrounding historic context. Therefore, staff is supportive of this proposed height of the structure. So here you can see the compatibility demonstration showing how the proposed design fits in with other simple Queen Anne style gable structures in the district. This is simple, traditional, modern kind of Queen Anne style. And as you can see, has that front gable design for the front that fits kind of the character of the district, although it does have that related hip. So here are the elevations. To the left, west elevation is the front facade showing a simple traditional style. The home will have a one-story partial wood porch with a shed roof and a triple window on the first floor with two narrow windows flanking that one side, one wider center window, and above on the second floor, two sets of paired 1-over-1 windows. At that south elevation on the right, you can see two more of those triple windows as well as that two-car garage tucked in behind the front portion of the house. This will also feature single 1-over-1 windows, and the roof at this elevation features a hip dormer as well as an in-wall dormer above the garage, which won't be visible from the front facade. And then here is the rear elevation at the east. Here you can see the proposed paired 1-over-1 windows again at the first and second floor. And at the north elevation also features those paired windows as well as French doors from the dining area with plates with slide lights leading out to a concrete patio. And then these are the isometric views of this tandem house design. The proposed infill structure's overall mass and form are characteristic of the district. It meets guidelines 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, 4.7, and 4.8, as well as character defining features for the district. Therefore, staff is recommending approval.
Do you have any questions for staff?
I have two questions. First of all, it looks as if the proposed design violates the bulk plane, but I didn't see in the proposed motion that there is a bulk plane, that you're requesting a bulk plane adjustment.
Right. There was no current request. However, they could request that in phase 2, or they could also look at getting a variance. So they're really going to have to let us know because this is just phase 1.
Okay. And I have another question, which is, and this might be a feature of tandem houses, which I never quite understood if it's a tandem house or ADU, but there is no reference to guideline 4.19, which is compatibility to the primary structure. And is that because that's not a guideline that is considered in terms, and there's nothing, we don't see them together in any of the, there's no drawing that shows them together. We have the numbers, so we know the new one is 6 feet taller, but we don't see anything about what their relationship is in the.
I think with, at least for me, with ADUs, I think they're considered more of like a secondary structure. With tandem houses, I think they stand more on their own. So for me, when I was looking at it, I'm reviewing it against the context of the district and not really, does it match the primary structure that's already on the lot. Great, for me personally.
Yes, thank you.
Then I guess related to that, the primary structure is not within the.
It's a non-contributing structure in the district, right? So I was looking at this structure kind of in the overall context and not really needing it to match the non-contributing structure on the front of the lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then, kind of a follow-up with the whole thing discussion. The R&O letter has comments about that. So
But you mentioned that there were updates made to the design.
There were, they did address some of them. I think they had actually asked them to lower the roof height a little bit on the hip part. But when we were going through the design, we felt that keeping the roof all the same level looked better and made more sense for the design. So that's what the applicant went with. I did let the RNO know though that they could still request the administrative adjustment or go after the variance for the bulk plane issues.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? All right, go ahead. The applicant to join us.
Yep, okay. So my name is Dean Ritchie. I'm the architect for this project. I live at 5180 Vallejo. Crystal's, I think pretty well described the building. I'll just touch on a couple of the questions you had. The first one was, regarding the height and bulk plane. I'm sure you guys have seen this issue over and over again. This is our fourth tandem in a historic district, and we always come across this issue. We generally, actually in all cases, we've submitted something that complies with the height and the bulk plane initially, and then with working with staff, they always get a little bit taller to be more consistent with the forms of the neighborhood. And that's happened in this case as well. So we're a couple feet over the height, and there is that little bit of a bulk plane projection, but on the alley, which I think is probably better than a side interior lot line. With regards to what we did coming out of the RNO is where that bulk plane violation is right now. You can see it on the east elevation. They requested that we make that roof a hip roof. That was originally a gable, so the bulk plane violation was more significant. So that was the biggest change coming out of there. I think the case with all these, we've tried to keep the mass of the building. You can see it's the two-story mass is 10 feet away roughly from the adjacent lot line to the north, so that height probably isn't as big of an issue. Yeah, we've tried to sort of balance, get as close as we could to the, that rear third of the zoning requirement makes for pretty squatty building. So we've tried to not completely disregard that height or the bulk plane, but get a building that is at least, pretty consistent with the neighborhood. So hopefully we've done that. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Already addressed all of our questions, so thank you very much for your time. Is there anyone on the line who would like to make public comments on this project? So use the hand raise button at this time. Quiet group today. All right, no comments. All right, let's move into deliberation then. What did everybody think? Tandem House, and again, it's phase one, so it will come back to us for design details.
Maybe I'll start by saying that I understand that this house, because the tandem house doesn't have to actually relate or be subordinate to the main house, but I am a little bit concerned about the neighborhood, and I should get the correct guideline up. Sort of the neighborhood pattern, because now you have a house on the alley that's actually bigger than the house on the street. And all of the examples, the historic examples that were shown are actually Main Street houses. They're not alley houses. And it just worries me that this looks like freestanding house that's in the wrong location. But that's, again, it just has to do with the neighborhood pattern, and I will find the correct guideline so that I can tell you what that is. Oh, it's actually 4.1. And I just am curious whether other commissioners feel that this actually meets 4.1.
I think that's an interesting comment. I think because the main house is not contributing and could therefore be like demolished, if a new infill that's two-story could be constructed. I guess it didn't bother me that this one is taller and looks like it's a rock spot. I think if that were a contributing structure, I'd feel much differently about it. But that was my thought.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the other question that arose for me, thinking about that question as I was reviewing this before today, was if you were to design something that were subordinate to that existing primary structure,
What would it look like?
you know, it would be totally just a tiny little
Garage.
basically. So,
A square garage.
yeah. Yeah, but it is very strange condition as it currently is.
I think that the renderings sort of are one of the things that leads to that, because the renderings show it in a field in the suburbs. That is, I think, one of the things that sort of worried me is that it's actually not in the field of the suburbs.
Yeah.
It's a nice little tiny kind of branch type. Okay, well.
Any other comments? Is everyone in agreement with staff's assessment on this? And it sounds like, you know, they can address the zoning issues in a few different ways and back to us to provide recommendations for that. So, great. All right, then who would like to make the motion?
Oh, Madam Chair, I'll make the motion. I move to approve application 2022-CUA-575 for the mass, form, and context of the proposed infill structure at 3426 Elliott Street, as per presented testimony, submitted documentation, guidelines, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, 4.7, and 4.8, the Potter Highlands character defining features, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thank you, Julie.
Second.
Thank you, Gary. Seconding. All right. All for the motion, or for the vote, sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Right, motion passes unanimously and the project is approved. All right, so our next project up for design review is 2022-COA-560 at 52.5 Pearl Street.
I do all the things.
Okay, so our next project is for a new accessory dwelling unit in the Alamo Placita Historic District at 525 Pearl Street. Here is the primary structure. It is a cross-room bungalow. This is a mid-block structure. However, the property is adjacent to a surface parking lot for a permanent development that is also in the district, which you can see here in this aerial image. So an existing non-historic garage will be demolished from the site. It's located on the north side of the site and will be replaced with a new accessory dwelling unit in a similar location. A new drive aisle will be constructed to allow access to the accessory dwelling unit. And the proposed ADU is going to have a gable roof. This roof plan is showing skylights on the south roof slope, but they're not indicated on the north roof slope. However, elevation drawings do indicate that there will potentially be skylights on the north roof slope as well, so that does need to be clarified. So we are asking for clarification on that issue. This ADU will have an exterior stair, which is located on the south side of the structure. So here is the proposed floor plan. It will be an accessory dwelling unit with a two-car garage on the ground floor, and then additional bike storage with a small bathroom and utility storage. And then there will be still surface parking
that allows access into the interior of the site from the grade. That will be a stair that is new. Staff is not entirely clear on the site work that is proposed for this site, so we are asking for additional clarification from that site work as well. But the habitable space for the ADU is a 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor, accessed by an exterior stair. So this proposed ADU is a gable roof structure. Initially, the applicant was proposing an asymmetrical roof structure due to the bulk plane issues. However, staff felt that the asymmetry of the accessory dwelling unit was not compatible with the surrounding historic context. So we did recommend to the applicant that they do a symmetrical gable roof, and that resulted in the roof being on the bulk plane on the north side of the property. So the applicant is requesting an administrative adjustment for height and bulk plane for that encroachment on the north side of the property. Along the alley, the ADU will have a flush steel door, which is indicated as fiberglass in the elevation drawing. So we are asking some additional clarifications on some of the material details for this ADU, as there's some slight conflicts between what we see in the elevation drawings and the material samples provided. On the front interior lot side, the bike storage area will have an aluminum glass glazed door that is not visible from the public right of way. And then it will have a full light man door that allows access into the ADU, and all the windows proposed for this ADU, as shown in elevation, are 1/1 fiberglass windows. However, some of the material details indicate that they have divided lights. We would recommend that this ADU has the 1/1 windows as shown in elevation, as the windows on the existing craftsman structure recently in design. So here are the side elevations. We have the south elevation on the left side of the screen and the north elevation on the right side of the screen. So that's where you're seeing those potential skylights that will be located on the north roof slope, which are not shown in the roof plan. We do not have concerns over the skylights, as they're all indicated to be a flat mounted skylight, which the commission has passed. The roofing will be in asphalt shingle. And then the ADU itself will be clad in this pine board and batten siding. The commission did recently update their design guidelines to allow for the limited use of board and batten siding. Staff do feel that this is appropriate cladding material for this accessory dwelling unit, which is located in the rear of the property and will have minimal visibility from the public. This will have a mini split, which is located on the north side of the property. And then the doors located on ground level are just simple fiberglass doors to allow access to the interior spaces. So staff is recommending approval with conditions of this ADU, and I don't have the report in front of me, so crap. Too many things. So approval with conditions, with the condition that all windows be inset at least 2 inches into the wall plane, and that the skylight profile is shown in plan. And I do believe I have additional conditions that I mentioned in my recommendation that didn't make it into the staff report that relate to using the simple 1/1 windows, and then just some additional detailed clarifications based on discrepancies between the materials provided and what's noted in the elevation. Brittany, are there any questions for staff?
I have a question about the 2 inches from the wall plane. These windows are installed in a wood frame exterior wall. The intent is not really to recess the windows further back than they would have been put in traditionally in a wood frame wall. Is that correct?
So when we updated the guidelines,
we just said that all windows and all cladding materials need to be inset 2 inches from the wall plane for a double hung window. This could be measured from the lower sash, but we didn't provide any of those clarifications. And now that I'm looking at the plans, I see that the material specs do not show a divided light window, so I'm probably thinking of a totally different project. So go with my conditions.
So if you measure it from the lower sash,
Okay. So the two clarifications, like the extra condition.
Yeah, no extra conditions.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. No,
Too many things.
all right.
I have a question about how the bulk plane violation is going to be addressed.
I guess I'm not clear on your question.
In other words, should it be part of the motion, or is it something that the applicant is pursuing independently of us?
I thought I did put it in the motion. Did I not?
I didn't see it.
Well, you would want to include that in your motion. I'd have to look up the specific section of the zoning code, but I believe it's 12.457, but I'm let me look it up.
Yeah, you can always look that up while we're hearing from the applicant.
My apologies.
And you had mentioned that you need some site work clarification, but I don't see any conditions about that. What was it that you clarified in the site?
So I'm pretty sure there's some new fencing proposed, but it's not entirely clear to me if it's new or existing. I do think they're gonna have to reconfigure some of the fencing of this concrete pad that you see here, and then there's a fence on the site wall. So just some clarification between existing and proposed. I don't have any actual concerns about the site work, so
Just documenting it.
yeah.
Great. Any other questions for Brittany? All right, let's go ahead and promote the applicants.
I'm showing 2 Matthew Cricks in the participants. If the actual Matthew Crick could raise their hand so I can promote them.
All right. There we go. So you can go ahead and unmute yourself when you're ready, and you have up to 10 minutes. Please start with your name and address for the record.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Crick. I'm the architect for this project. Just wanted to thank you, Brittany, again for that presentation and for all your collaboration on this so far. This is really, the clients and I are all excited about the changes that we've made, and we think we have a better building now than when we went in for historic review. So Landmark has helped us, and I think it's, I think we're all benefiting from it already. To answer some of your questions that came up, we were waffling back and forth on the skylights on the north side there. We eventually decided that yes, we wanted to include the skylights on the north side. So I apologize that wasn't in the site plan, but we would like to have 2 of them there and then 2 on the south side. They're all the same size skylights, and we want them to be flush mounted so that they're not projecting out any further than they need to. Let's see, there were some questions about the site work in the back. We would like to keep all the grass and all the, if you can flip to that page, I don't know if I can. There's a tree in the back that's a full mature tree, a great tree that we want to keep. And so basically, if you look at everything from that and beyond to the west side is what we're going to be manipulating, and the rest we're going to be keeping the same. So there'll be grass turf in the center, and then there'll be it's just cast in place concrete walkways on either side, and there'll be a little planter mulch area that's around the stair enclosure. So sorry, can I control this or share my screen? No, I can't hear you guys. I don't know if you can still hear me. Give me a thumbs up. Yeah. No. Sorry, can you guys see me still or hear me? I'll continue on, I guess. So we wanted to inset the windows. This is that 2-inch, that was a question there that was brought up. So for that, we have a 2x6 wall. The windows are about 3 inches or so. So we can inset them in with a retrofit type of adjustment, and then we can bring them as far as we can. But the 2x6 wall is a bit of a limitation there. And then we want the steel door for the garage door as well. So the steel door will be the way we're going. We're sorry about that typo in the elevation, and that'll be an insulated door. The last part was the encroaching beyond the bulk plane there, allowing us to bulk encroach through there, helped it look more symmetrical, and we're all in favor of how that's going. So we'll need some type of administrative adjustment, some approval for that when we go back in for zoning and stuff like that. But that's it for me. Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me now? Oh.
Okay.
I can hear you guys.
So for all of our applicants, we're having some audio issues. We're now using my computer. So please project, as we will only have one laptop and one volume that I have turned up as much as possible.
And please let us know if you can't hear us as
No.
well.
Okay.
And then we paused your time, Matthew, so you still have 9 minutes. So we'll just restart all that. So just give me 1 second while I get that coordinated.
Okay. So you didn't hear anything? First at the beginning?
Really low volume.
Can you speak up some more, Matthew?
Did you hear anything?
We just heard the beginning of your
Just the beginning.
presentation, so you may
Yeah.
want to just restart your
Yeah.
conversation. You had said that you thought the design had improved through the landmark process, and then we pretty much didn't hear anything after that.
We'll restart your whole time.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
again, please speak as loudly as
Okay.
possible because we are using my laptop computer sound.
Okay. Well, Brittany, we just wanted to thank you for your guidance to this. We think the project got better as we went through the rounds of review, and the symmetrical roof lines that you suggested, all the clients really liked it. We liked it. So I think this is a better building now that's been through Landmark, and not only does it match the neighborhood, but also it's just a more functional too. So there were a couple questions that came up about the skylights. we were waffling back and forth if we wanted skylights on the north side. We ultimately decided that we did. So there'll be 2 skylights on the north and then 2 skylights on the south side. Sorry for not including that on that site plan. For the garage door, we'd like to go with a steel door with a fiberglass insulation inside. So it's an insulated garage door. And for those windows, there was a question about that. You know, we have a 2x6 exterior wall. The windows are about.
1 second.
Did the audio come back? Okay.
All right, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, great, thank you. We can hear you much clearer now. Please.
Okay, so I can stop yelling or?
Yeah.
Okay. It was kind of strange yelling at you guys. I was trying to. Okay, I'll talk at a volume. There was a question about the inset windows. We're working with the 2x6 exterior wall. The windows are about 3.5 inches. And so our plan was for that is they offer a retrofit type of insert that you can put into the frame of the window so you can scoot it back 2 inches. And so that we're not using the nailing fins, but we're going to try to inset it as far as we can. And I think there's enough space to get 2 inches. And I don't know if that's measured from the outside face of trim or if that's from the face of finish, but I think we can get 2 inches fairly easy and then have a little bit of a return on the inside as well. So we do want to have a steel door on the garage door side on the alley side, and then we'll be insulated on the interior. So I just wanted to clarify that. And the 1/1 windows, those are just double hung windows, keep them pretty simple and plain. So that's the final direction we went with that. And then for the site work, there's a really nice existing tree in the middle of the yard there. Basically, we want to try to keep that as intact as possible. So we're really only working with everything to the west of that. We're planning for 2 cast in place concrete sidewalks on the north and south side. If you want, there's a colored one. Yeah, that's a good best one to show. So and then we might have a little grassy lawn in between it, and that kind of gravel looking area there. That's actually just it looks weird in this view, but it's a flagstone type of paver that's existing. We want to keep that intact as well. So we're really not touching too much from the tree east. We're trying to keep that all the same that we can. And let me see. We just wanted to make sure that we include the administrative adjustment for that bulk plane. We're going through that on the north side. I think that really helps out the project from a neighborhood standpoint and from the interior use of it as well. And was there any other questions I can answer while I'm on? Say again?
Could you address the extent of fencing modification?
The fencing, sure. We're going to keep the same fencing style that is. If you look kind of where the timer's at, I don't know if you're seeing beyond there, but we're going to keep the same 6-inch vertical wood pickets. That'll be following the property line, and then right at the 5-foot area, it'll return back to the ADU. So there'll be a new section of it added there. And actually on the other side, on the south side, we're keeping that fence almost exactly the same. we might need, I think we're keeping the gate the exact same. So the only adjustments to the exterior fence are on that north side. And it's just from the existing garage back to the 5-foot setback line.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you for your time.
Okay, no, thank you for your time, guys. And
All right, is there anyone on the line who would like to make a public comment on this project? Please use the hand raise button at this time. No public comments? Okay, and I hope everyone can hear me. All right, so then let's go ahead and move into the bridge. Oh, that's a recap. So replacement of fencing is something we do need to review and approve. So that just needs to be included in the conditions, yes. And then the administrative adjustment section of the zoning code is 12.4.5.30. And we are recommending that. So recommending an administrative adjustment for height and bulk. For height and bulk plan for Denver zoning code 12.4.5.3. And remember to project since our speakers.
We're gonna do some.
Oh my goodness. I totally got to the motion. About the motion. Thank you. Yeah, so what did everyone think? I'm sorry, I think the technical difficulties just got to me.
I really enjoy the drawings.
Yes,
I mean,
they're beautiful.
it's good to see that skill level hasn't disappeared. And also, I think with the staff's recommendation, I think this is a well-designed, very compliant. Very compliant with the guidelines.
Thank you, Gary. Everybody else? Great. Me too. And yeah, it's very rare that we get hand-drawn, drawings in general. And to get them of such a high quality is also very rare, so. That's fun. Okay, well, so, would someone like to try a motion now that we have discussed our thoughts?
Madam Chair, I move to conditionally approve application number 2022-COA-560 for the new accessory dwelling unit at 525.5 Pearl Street, as per design guidelines 4.1, 4.8, 4.18 through 4.20, 5.6, 5.18, carefully defining features in the Elmo Lucida Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation and information provided in the staff report with the following conditions. 1, that the windows are in 7 east inches in the wall plan. 2, to show all the skylights on the proposed plan. 3, to show the proposed modifications to the existing fence. Further move to recommend a administrative adjustment per city ordinance 12.4.5.3 for height and bulk plan adjustment.
Thank you, Gary. All right, do you have a second? Thanks, Julie. All right, any further discussion on the motion? Let's vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained?
motion passes unanimously and the project is conditionally approved. So you can work with staff to those conditions. Okay, let's see, 2:51. Does anyone need a restroom break? Or are we good at restroom break? All right, we're gonna take a quick break. And we'll be back shortly. So we're gonna mute for just a moment and we'll be back in a minute to continue. Thanks.
Great. So thanks, everybody. I think that we've troubleshooted a little bit more of the tech issues, so hopefully you can all hear us. If there's anyone on the line who can't hear us, cannot hear us, and is having trouble, please send us a message in the chat so we know. All right, we'll go ahead and resume the meeting. So the next project up for design review is 2022-COA-577 at 3255 Newton Street. Go ahead, Brittany.
So our next application is for an accessory dwelling unit in the Packard Hill Historic District at 3255 Newton Street. This accessory dwelling unit has previously been reviewed and denied by the Landmark Preservation Commission on June 21st, 2022. There have been some revisions made to the design and building program, which we will go over in today's meeting. So here is the proposed site. It is a single family residence with an existing detached non-historic garage. The new accessory dwelling unit will be constructed to the south side of the existing detached garage. No changes are proposed for the primary structure or the existing garage structure. During the last commission meeting, there was concern over a new sidewalk leading from the accessory dwelling unit into the street sidewalk. So the applicant has revised the design to have a access walkway coming off of the existing access walkway from the sidewalk. So that is more integrated into the design for commission comment at the last. Generally speaking, the building footprint has not changed, but the programming of the building has changed. So the proposed accessory dwelling unit initially was going to be a 3-bedroom accessory dwelling unit structure. The applicant has revised that down to a 2-bedroom accessory dwelling unit with the bedrooms located on the 2nd floor and a living space located on the ground floor with a single car garage as well. So when I wrote the staff report, I did have some concerns over this meeting the Denver zoning code for the SU zone district, which limits gross floor area to 864 feet for this lot. I've had additional clarification that the building footprint, which is only the ground floor, which is 787 square feet here, does meet that requirement. And then you can just take the square footage of the habitable space. So the first and second floor, which is less than 864 square feet, which you see in this calculation here. Sorry. Showing that it's 859 habitable square feet for the ADU. And that is all in compliance with the Denver zoning code in terms of building use and building footprint. This confused me a lot, so I'm happy to explain it further if it needs further explanation. In terms of the design, the applicant, again, hasn't changed the design too significantly from the prior massing. That the commission did express concerns over the footprint of the accessory dwelling unit in comparison to the primary structure. The applicant was originally proposing a roof structure, and they have revised it to a zip roof structure to better match the zip roof form of the primary structure. Additionally, the applicant has changed some of the material cladding on the accessory dwelling unit. So previously, the 1-story bump out that was proposed on the south side of the ADU was supposed to be clad in a vertical siding. That is now going to be the same cladding material that is proposed for the accessory dwelling unit, which is a 4-inch lap siding. I do want to express that I do have concerns over this project still meeting the Denver zoning code, as the existing garage has a garage door and the proposed ADU has a garage door. And to my understanding of the Denver zoning code, again, I'm not a zoning expert, only one accessory structure can have vehicle access. So it is my understanding that the existing garage or the new accessory dwelling unit could not have vehicular access doors. If that is the case, it could create conflicts for the applicant in terms of the programming that they have proposed for the ADU, and allowing that to be a garage. In terms of the accessory dwelling unit design, I do have concerns that the applicant has not restudied the footprint of the primary of the proposed ADU to the primary structure. The primary structure has a ground floor square footage of 803 square feet, and this proposed ADU has 787 square feet at the ground floor. The applicant did reconfigure from a 3-bedroom ADU to a 2-bedroom ADU, so they have some work needed in terms of internal use and habitable space, but it has not significantly changed from what the commission expressed concern over at the June 21st meeting. The commission did indicate at that meeting, though, that they may feel comfortable with this form if the roof form was more similar to the primary structure. And as you can see today, that is the case. So this would be good for the commission to discuss if this footprint is appropriate for this site. Staff do have concerns over the floor-to-floor height that is proposed for this ADU. So to staff, the second floor does appear to be much taller than the first floor, and that's due to the placement of the windows in the wall plane on the facade of the second floor. The floor-to-floor heights actually do have a second floor that is smaller than the first floor, but to staff, it does not give the exterior appearance of that. The applicant did place a belly band around the structure in response to staff's comments that the floor-to-floor heights from the exterior do appear to be off. However, we do not feel that it's significantly addressing that concern due to the placement of the second floor windows. Additionally, this is the project that is showing 1:1 windows, but some of the application materials are showing a divided light window. There will need to be additional clarity provided on the window design. Again, we would encourage the 1:1 windows for this project as shown in elevation, as that is more typical of the surrounding context and the primary structure. So in terms of the height of this proposed ADU, it is within the height and bulk plane, and it is subordinate in height to the primary structure. So the primary structure is 29 feet in height, and this proposed ADU is 22 feet 11 3/4 of an inch. This is similar to what was proposed before. Again, the commission did express concern over the height of this structure, but that was in relation to the roof form as well. So this is something for the commission to consider if the modification of the roof form sufficiently addresses the commission's concerns. A standard size brick is proposed for that 1-story bump out, and the rest of the cladding will be a 5% wrap siding material with a 4-inch reveal. Generally speaking, a simple combination of materials are proposed for this ADU. In the isometric views of the structure, the fencing is shown to be blocking the garage vehicular access for the ADU. So again, it's not clear to staff what that garage space may be used for based on conflicting information in the plan. However, the isometrics are the only space that clearly shows some of the fencing, so we would need additional details on some of the site work as well. And then in terms of the proposed lighting, there is some conflicting information there as to the placement of the lighting on the accessory building. So at this time, staff are recommending denial of this application as we feel that it has been significantly reduced in scale and massing from the June 21st meeting, although the programming has been reconfigured and there have been changes made to the proposed program. And then we have additional concerns over it meeting the Denver zoning code in terms of allowing 2 garage doors for accessory structures on this site.
Thank you, Brittany. Are there any questions for staff? Is the applicant present? Let's we promote them.
Do you want the applicant to raise your hand so that I can talk to who you are, so I can promote you? Yeah, those are all the attendees. Yeah, there's no one mounting the data center.
So, and you were under the impression that he would be in attendance?
So I did send them the information on how to join the meeting. I never received a response, but this isn't atypical. I think all of us have experienced not receiving a response from applicants on how to join the meeting. So.
Okay. I guess. Do we just move forward?
In the past.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the last design review project. It's not like we can give them more time to join. Right?
I will say that Nate has asked us to take action on 155 Humboldt Street. He did say that a presentation or discussion wasn't needed, but we would need to formally deny it.
Even though the demolition wasn't approved?
Yeah, so basically just that to formally say that you're denying the design review application based on the fact that the demolition was denied.
We could do that first, but I don't.
That's not gonna make.
That's not gonna take very long, yeah. If it's not that, I mean, normally we would do that if we thought like we moved so fast that the applicant wasn't available. Like, we don't know that this applicant's gonna join at all, right? So maybe we move forward since you just presented this project. So is there anyone on the line who would like to make a public comment on this project? We're not gonna hear from the applicant because they're not present. But if you have a comment on this project, please use the hand raise button at this time. Nope. Okay. All right, then let's go ahead and move into deliberation. So commissioners, what were your thoughts?
I think Brittany had enough concerns that we could not condition away all of those concerns. I think denial is really the quickest route to a successful redo of this project for the client and the architect.
I think a fundamental problem with trying for this proposal is trying to retain the existing garage and yet putting another building on the site.
Yeah.
That if there was a proposal that eliminated the existing garage and tried to combine all the programmatic scope into a single structure, it might have a better chance of meeting the requirements.
I guess that's where I kind of am unsure. Feels to me like the sort of lower half that is at the very back of the site and very much out of sight of public view. There is a what seems like a lot of scale of accessory buildings there, but the part that comes up into the height of the existing primary structure, that feels reasonably subordinate to me. So I'm, short of totally rearranging that program at the ground floor, I can't imagine what the applicant could do with the height and the roof form that would better meet the guidelines as far as scale, coordination. I don't know how other commissioners feel about that.
think it's such a big unknown. Because the big unknown is it 3 structures or 2 structures? If you don't know the answer to that, it's very hard to actually evaluate it at all, to me. Well, as proposed, it is 3 structures, right? So I think that's what we have to review today, is assuming that it's 3 structures. I think, Gary, to your point, if it were 2 structures instead, it might be easier to, or they could position it differently, so it's not as visible from the street or.
And a 2-story accessory dwelling unit could meet the guidelines, so it's not necessarily a height issue in a revised theoretical design. There's opportunity to meet the subordination requirements as well as basic compatibility and so forth with a 2-story structure that is conceived to meet the guidelines rather than trying to make 3 structures on the site comply. It's also curious, the fence across the garage door. I'm wondering if that was a contrivance to say it doesn't have a second garage door entrance, and then sometime later the fence will disappear.
Or it's just a.
Well, it could be an error.
It could be an
It could be an error.
We're gonna give the applicant the benefit of the doubt, that sometimes they just forget to cut the fence or whatever to get the window. Yeah. Probably just had it hidden in their plan view and then it showed up in the view. Yeah, I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence with this. It's tough because it's so visible from the side yard, but it is set back pretty far. I think that the hip roof did help. I do agree with Brittany's comments about the windows. The proportions seem like everything's kind of too close to the roof line now. I think originally they had that window height when it was front gable, and so it looked very different than if it were a hip roof. So now that it's a hip, that doesn't really make sense to me anymore, proportionally. But it's tough. I don't want to comment on a zoning matter. Like if they want to have a garage door at the back, that's on the alley. I don't really care. If zoning doesn't approve it, they're gonna have to come back with a revised application anyway. I think the real issue is, you're losing a lot of open space on this lot. And that is kind of different than the historic patterns. And as we've discussed, the 3 structures, it's not feeling as subordinate. It's so built up. So I guess I'd lean towards what everyone else was saying, that lean towards staff recommendation for denial for that reason. But I do think that the improvements they've made have helped make it more compatible. Yeah, absolutely. But it's still. So is there any way, I guess I'm just wondering, and the applicant's not here to hear this, but Brittany, you can relay this to them. Is there any way to make 3 structures like this work, or are we kind of saying, I'm just wondering, how to give them a path forward? Anybody have thoughts on that? And have it be subordinate? Yeah, I think that's, sure, you could get 3 on there, but can it be subordinate to the original?
That's the question is it a subordination question or a question of neighborhood planning patterns?
Yeah.
So I would say that's
a really good point as well. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I think that's right, because we've seen as we've said, the hip roof has helped a lot, and then it's lower down than the primary building. I can't remember all the things that they've done, but simplified some of the siding. But I think it really is more about the kind of development pattern the site rather than the subordination of the building. So I agree that.
Guidelines.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's even.
Is it 4.1?
Oh, sorry, yes. Yeah, all right.
Is that it?
One,
Sign the
A,
site plan of a new building to be compatible with existing historic block coverage patterns.
And then it references 4.18 as well.
Yeah. Locate a new garage or secondary structure to reinforce surrounding historic development.
I do think 4.8 is still relevant though, as we've talked about with the windows, just so, to make it clear that that is.
Sounds like everyone's in agreement and there's just no way to make conditions around this. The applicant will just have to try
Remove.
another option. Okay. So who's going to make the motion?
I can make the motion.
Sam?
Here I move to deny application number 2022 COA 577 for the new accessory dwelling unit at 3255 Newton Street as per design guidelines 4.1, 4.8, 4.18 to 4.20, 5.6, 5.18, character defining features for the Packard Hills Historic District, presented testimony and submitted documentation and information provided in the staff report.
Sam?
I'll second.
Ooh, that was like a tie. I'm gonna go with George. Maybe it's because he's closer to me. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? All right, motion passes unanimously and the project is denied. Okay, so before we move on to the business items, it sounds like we do need to formally make a motion on the design review project for, so it'd be project number 2023 COA-001. Ooh, first year. At 155 Humboldt Street. So that was the first design review project on our agenda that we skipped over. We denied the demolition. So it sounds like that motion just needs to.
So, yeah, you can just say deny the design review application based on the denial of the demolition.
Okay. So it's make motion. Thanks, Erica.
I move to deny application number 2023 COA-001 at 155 Humboldt Street on the basis of denial of the application for demolition at the same address.
Thanks, Erica. Second. Thanks, Gary. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? All right, motion passes unanimously. So now we're going to move into our business items, and we've got on the screen here the process for this. I'll go ahead and announce the item. Staff's going to introduce it. We're not hearing from applicants for these business items, so we'll just open it up for public comments, and then commission will move into deliberation and vote. So the first item is the Colorado Women's College National Register Historic District nomination.
Supervisor today, so ask me all your most difficult questions. So our first business item is a review of a national register nomination for the Colorado Women's College. This nomination is actually an expansion of the existing nomination for fall, which was listed in 1970 for its local significance in the area of architecture and education. The revised boundaries now encompass the entirety of the intact portion of the campus associated with its use as the Colorado Women's College. And so a little extra information for you on Colorado Women's College. This is what we also know as the Johnson Wales campus. However, it is just the west portion of the campus that will be included in the designation, and the other half was primarily educational buildings and not dorms, and it's currently owned by Benefit Schools. So these buildings that are included in the nomination will be used by multiple agencies and groups, including all. Other buildings which are former dorms will be adapted for affordable housing by the city and other agencies, similar to what happened at Loretta Heights, and they will also be using federal and state tax credits to make these projects work. Brittany, could you use this slide? Right, and here's the pictures of the dorms that will be included in the designation boundaries. So the property is eligible under criterion A for education and social history, with association with women's history and gender. It was one of the few institutions for women's higher education in Colorado. It was a Baptist organization, whereas Laurel Heights was a former Catholic association. The property or the area in question is also eligible under criterion C for its architecture being Gothic and also having some great modernist buildings on the site. It was designed by master architects including Jackson and Betts, Arthur Axton, and Stephen Morse. The period of significance is listed as 1889 to 1966. This begins with the start of the campus and extends through the last year the campus was known as the Colorado Women's College. The name had later been changed to Temple Pool College in 1967 and then changed back to Colorado Women's College. Staff just has a couple of recommendations. We do recommend that you approve and forward this to the board. The recommendations we have that are one, to extend the period of significance through 1981. This rule ceased to function as the Colorado Women's College. And two, to include the quad as a contributing resource to the historic district, as it is an important feature in the historic district. Good, thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
So regarding the boundary, it wasn't implied or discussed really in the nomination, but my understanding from what you've said is that basically the educational buildings are not included because they're under different ownership and they're basically not part of this rehab project.
Correct. So right now the educational buildings are, I think, owned and operated by Denver Public Schools. And the part of the impetus for the expansion of the boundary is to provide tax credits for those affordable housing projects like they did at Loretta Heights. So I believe that right now that's the reason. I think there's always a potential to expand the boundary area.
I have a question. Is the library, not the former DU Law building, but the library and the chapel, which were within the period of significance, are they protected in any manner?
They're not, as I understand it, yeah. And that's a Temple.
Hornbein.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Yeah, that was my question is, have they considered also designating locally, or is it only,
I think right now they're just talking about National Register. I'm not quite sure where they are in the planning process. They're doing a small area plan for this. They could have or not, or if this was part of the East to the Central planning process. I think those plans recommended some form of local designation. So I think it's something that there's planning support for. I think there's definitely support for the program. So
Street Hall is locally designated. So
yes,
It has its,
it has a facades.
So I have one other question for you, and it's kind of really proposing that with the recommendation for period of significance extension, which I understand, if we were to recommend it to 1981, that would trigger needing to make the justification for a 50
not within the 50-year guidelines of National Register, basically needing to make the case of its exceptional significance. So given that, would you recommend maybe not having it to 1981, but more like 73? Yeah, that's just well, it'll notify her.
Yeah, I think we're so used to the 30 years here that we're like, yeah, of course.
Yeah, but just so you know, that means that I was there during the period of significance. Holy cow, I'm old.
Might be
Get a
the
plaque to hang
reason it's exceptional.
That's right. So. Kara, if you're available to help answer this question, go ahead and unmute.
We need the Ouija board or something.
Send us a sign. Okay, any other questions while we're seeing if Kara can do? No? Okay. Well, if we hear back from her.
So Becca, so should we go ahead and approve this and recommend this to the keeper as it is?
Well, maybe we talk about that.
Yeah, I have more to,
yeah.
Well, I had a question for Rebecca.
Go for it.
Oh, okay. So could this be altered later to include the period at the time that I was there?
Well, so all we're doing is making a recommendation, right? So I think we could provide a friendly comment that's not a formal motion that says you may want to consider changing your significance. So you can motion it, forward it, recommend approval without that.
Okay. All right. It doesn't seem like Kara's available, so maybe we move forward. Are there any public comments on this? Please use the hand raise button at this time if you do have a comment. All right. Then let's move into deliberation. So, what do we really think? And Erica, maybe you can get us kickstarted because you said you have some. Kara, Vice Mayor. Oh. Kara?
You went up green, so I don't know. Like a seance.
Oh, she's unmuted.
Hi, I apologize. I was on a call with Kathy and I turned you guys down. Did you need me or I was talking and you had unmuted me?
Yes, so we had a question for you. Erica had a question, so do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So Kara, I understand the staff recommendation of commenting on the period of significance being extended past what is recommended or stated in the nomination. However, since 1981 is within, 40 years in the past rather than 50 years, I'm just wondering, it seems like 1973 would be a better recommended ending date for the period of significance, so it doesn't trigger criteria consideration G. And I just wanted to see if staff would agree with that or not.
I thought about that when I put in the period of significance. And I wasn't quite sure what the Park Service requirements were in terms of something that was, 9-ish years, not quite the 50 years, if they were going to require a criterion G still or not, because I knew that had been discussion that if it was pretty close, you didn't have to. So if you wanted to change it, I just felt like then keeping it actually where it is isn't the worst thing. It just, you lose the last 20 some years of its history. And I felt like the more natural conclusion was 1981 versus 1966. But I understood why they chose that as a name change, as a some sort of delineation of time period. I just didn't feel it was the best ending for the period of significance.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's the best answer for you guys, sorry, but that was my
great.
thought process.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Thank you.
All right, then let's go back into deliberation. So, yeah, Erica, you want to kick start?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just start with period of significance since we were just talking about that. I agree with staff about 66. The name change isn't really capturing this significance or ending of significance. However, from my experience with the National Register program, I think that 81 would still trigger the criteria consideration G, and I don't think they want to go that route. So I would recommend 73. It's not the most satisfying when you use the 50-year kind of guideline as the reason of a period of significance, but that's what I think I would recommend that they consider. And then the other thing I just wanted to raise is that in the discussion of women's history as an area of significance, I feel like they kind of missed the mark. And I'm talking about specifically kind of in the significance statements section where they discuss kind of, I think it's important to go over that there were some unfortunate kind of racism aspects to some of the social life there. I don't think that defines this women's college, but because of the way it's presented in the nomination, that just kind of seems like it goes straight from being significant for women's history into, into this history that isn't really related to women's history. So I would like to suggest that they kind of revisit that and just restate it. I'm not saying cut that out. I'm just saying maybe move it more into the context section where that's being acknowledged and discussed, but isn't the historic record that's being referenced for women's history significance. That's all.
I guess my main concern is that there are a couple of really interesting buildings that are outside of the district. Mason Hall is also, it's on the northern side.
It was significantly altered so that
But the other two are fabulous.
Yeah, the Watley Chapel is really amazing. And I that does actually raise one other thing, is that I think the boundary justification needs to be restated slightly, because to say that it's capturing the I don't know, I'm not sure how to restate it, but that they're saying, this is capturing the educational significance, and it's not. It honestly isn't. It's capturing one part of it, but isn't the primary buildings that were where that education was happening. So I think I think to be stronger, they should consider restating the boundary justification.
Yeah, I mean, there has been at least one really fabulous building lost on that campus. The Schrader Theater was that. I agree with what's been said. I live 1 block from the chapel. So I too was like, where are the rest of it? But I obviously am very excited that they are designating, as much as they can. I understand, it's hard to get everyone on board, so I don't see that being a reason to hold back, from designating, and hopefully they can get, they can continue and designate the rest of the campus with it, or, at least the significant buildings, because there are some, newer buildings on that side of campus that probably would, contribute. But yeah, so I mean, I'd be in support of recommending this as well. I was excited to see it come up. I was like, yes. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah, me
everyone in the
too.
neighborhood like loves it, and I've
Yeah.
always been like, oh, I hope this goes well.
Well, yeah, and especially if the quad is in this
Yeah.
particular area.
I would
At least
love
that's
to
what
see
Karen
it.
wanted it.
A local,
Yeah, for
district,
sure.
because that will provide great protection and design review. But I think this is great first step. Any other thoughts or comments? So, do we need to modify in order to capture, Erica, some of the things that you had mentioned?
I don't know if, the recommended staff motion was just to recommend forwarding it. And then it sounds
Yeah.
like, Becca, you were suggesting that kind of some of these comments could just then be relayed to them as not part of the official motion.
And the motion does say with recommended
Oh, you're right.
to extend.
So we could include your deliberation, your comments about
Women's significance.
What I might perhaps recommend consideration of extension of period of significance. I guess I'm neither here nor there about period of significance to be used. Except I'm just
Well, I
feeling
think
really
we could
old.
leave it how it's stated, because it doesn't say the date.
Yeah, you're right.
And then they can hear our comments on it. Right. Who's gonna make the motion?
Madam Chair, I would love to, since I wasn't here. That's really cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
I move to recommend.
Oh, wait a
Oh, go ahead. You need some. Okay.
Yeah, hi, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, I was just gonna say that you could add Erica's to the list of recommended edits of extending the period of significance, quad as contributing resource, and restudying the statement of significance under women's educational history.
Restating it, yeah.
Okay, let me give it a shot.
No, I hear what you're saying, Becca, restudying it, the justification, not the boundary itself, but the justification.
Restudy justification. Okay, let's see if I can screw this up. I move to recommend, I'm sure that I can, I move to recommend that the National Register nomination for Colorado Women's College be forwarded to the keeper of the National Register of Historic Places with the recommended edits to extend the period of significance, to add the quad as a contributing resource, to restudy the justification of the boundaries, and restudy the period or the significance to women's history. Per presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thanks, Julie. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Erica. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll call for the vote. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. Yay. All right, so the next business item is 655 North Broadway, and it's another National Register nomination, but this time for building and not a district. And so this nomination is for the building located at 555. The nomination argues that this building is significant the area architecture as an example of the international style. So the building is an excellent example of international style, categorized commercial building located outside of the building was designed by Theodore Miller Jr., a local builder architect, practiced the modern styles in the center. At the time, the industry was growing significantly outside of the areas of the building. So it was built at this time in urbanization and sparking development nationwide. Particularly remember the building at 555 North Broadway represented this larger trend which local papers described as a new era in downtown business and spaces. And during this time, various architectural styles that made up the movement, particularly the style,
outside the central business district, which is pretty rare. So this is a very important example of use of this international style outside of the central business district. So therefore, staff is recommending approval and forwarding the nomination to the.
Thank you, Becca. Any questions for staff?
I don't know if this is maybe a discussion item. I have an integrity issue. Because this building was painted silver, I think, but it did something to it to change its original appearance, which was more consistent with the mid-century modern style at the time that it was originally designed. I can't remember if the spandrels were turquoise or kind of flesh colored.
So that is not a current photo.
Has it been changing
It has been
recently?
painted turquoise, or it now looks turquoise on the spandrels.
Okay, so they changed.
So-
I haven't seen it in a little while.
So it's a little unclear to me what was original.
What was, if my memory serves, and I went back as far as Google Earth went, and those photographs aren't very good, but I remember the spandrels being colored like a porcelain enamel.
You're correct. They were colored. In the nomination form, they spend a portion of it talking about the segregation. But there were also a lot of changes to this.
Yeah, I saw that.
And in the last 2 or 3 years, they've been doing a big renovation to restore it to its original appearance.
Okay.
So this picture is from the nomination, but I'm not sure if they've done another change to the exterior since then. But I don't have the document on hand, but they did talk about the interior.
I just remember when they painted it, I thought it was a shame because it really sort of diminished the overall character of the building. Can't mess with a modern architecture building too much before you mess it up.
So I think it's on page 5 and 6B nomination. It talks about alterations in the 2021 to 2022 rehabilitation. They say, you know, they're rehabilitating it to serve as affordable housing units for Secretary of Interior standards. On the exterior, the historic curtain wall configuration was retained with new glazing installed and the spandrel panels cleaned out, repainted, returning the building's original aqua color.
Okay.
So these photos were taken in 2020. So
Maybe we should recommend that they update the photos included in the.
that's probably good.
Any other questions for staff? All right. Is there anyone on the line who would like to make a public comment on this nomination? Please use the hand raise button at this time if you would. All right. We're not seeing any hands raised, so let's go ahead and deliberate on this one. So yeah, thoughts, integrity concerns with the nomination?
This is not my part of the area of expertise, but I kept looking at this and wondering if this had been presented to us as an individual landmark, if this commission would have made it an individual Denver landmark.
So one important thing to keep in mind, though, is that for National Register, you only need to meet one criteria.
Yeah, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But I think that yes, thank you, and I think that that's a very important clarification. But they're coming to us as a commission. This part is part on it. They're coming to us as a commission and saying, do you agree that this should be on the, should it be forwarded? And even understanding that now we're working not under our criteria, but we're the Denver Landmarks Commission. We're not the Secretary of the Interior. And so they're coming to us and asking us, should we forward this back to them? And I kept looking at this building and thinking, I'm not sure if and maybe they would, maybe it turned out that the architect, was like the master architect of the era. And I don't know, but I just find this to be very thin, and understanding that I just don't understand what our part of it is, because I honestly, I'm skeptical that this is actually of a quality that should be in the National Historic Register. That's just my, you know, and I said, it's not my, it's your area of expertise, not mine, but I'm skeptical.
So that, I think that's interesting, and I probably shouldn't even be typing up right now, but I was just noticing, because I was looking over what criteria was it that it met. It's for embodying the distinctive characteristics of the type. It's I went over. It is interesting to me that the period of significance is 1 year or a 2-year period.
Right.
Too. So just during construction.
That's pretty typical when
Yeah.
it's just
Okay.
nominated for architecture, because you're really just trying to acknowledge the design elements that were in place when it was constructed.
Maybe it was significant for the Silverado debacle.
You know, in some ways, it's architecture only that is being argued, but in some ways it's also kind of related to community planning and development in that it's outside of downtown Denver. Like that is part of the significance that they're arguing for, which I buy into. That, you know, it is expanding downtown, and it's using the architectural language of the time that would have attracted commercial tenants that they wanted to attract outside of downtown. So I think I know you weren't asking this, but I'll just clarify too, that it really is coming from the state. So this isn't coming from the Secretary of the Interior. It's coming from the state who shepherds they oversee the National Register program for the state. And they ask local governments to comment on it for buildings that are in their local community, just as a way to kind of continue that engagement between local government and state government before forwarding on to the federal. So it's all kinds of levels of government.
I could be mistaken, but I believe the form was prepared by the same company that said Channel 7 was not significant. Yes. Which I find ironic.
Isn't it though? Yeah. Isn't it though? Yeah.
That's why we look at it for the merits of how it's written, not what it's stating.
Because to compare the two.
Well, Heritage Consulting Group does a lot of this work.
I think my point is they do what they're paid to do.
Personally, I feel like it's justifiable. I think on similar grounds to Erica that it is a notably kind of clear example of the century office tower outside of downtown Denver. I remember noticing that when I was, young and just becoming interested in modern architecture. That building really stood out to me as solid, even with its sort of silverized panel. The crispness of it and the kind of almost Miesian or like SOM style clarity is pretty rare in Denver. I can only think of maybe like 2 or 3 other buildings outside of downtown that have that.
Well said. Yeah, I mean, I think, does it meet our criteria for local designation? Maybe not. I don't know. They didn't try to argue based on our criteria. We have different criteria, but I think it does meet, it is a good example of international style. So I'd be supportive of forwarding it.
That's what they said about the
Channel
Kroger building.
7, yeah.
So that's
Ugly doesn't
subjective.
matter.
Ugly doesn't fit. Smaller. Ugly's not our purview.
Thank God. Well, on that note, I mean.
I just ask one more question. What would qualify us to not prove something? I mean, in other words, in this process, is there anything that would qualify us to say, oh, no, we don't actually think it should be forwarded to the secretary? Do you know what I'm saying? Because if it's all a done deal, essentially, because it comes to the state and we're just a step on the way, what?
Well, I mean, if it, say, lacked integrity, like if it had been so altered that we felt that it was no longer displaying those characteristics of modern architecture that it's being nominated for, I think that would be a clear. I will say too that, you know, because it's coming from the state, this isn't always the case, but usually it's gone through a vetting process already, in the sense of staff there have said, yes, we believe this is eligible. So it's not that we're getting any and every thing that is being considered for National Register. Does that make sense? Like we're kind of one step along the way, so but we're not the first step.
And we don't approve or deny.
That's right.
We can recommend, we can recommend comments and edits, but they can forward it either way. Yeah. It's not
There's
like,
another review board that,
yeah, it's
body
not
that
like
does,
local where it has to come to us and then if we pass it, it goes to city council.
Yeah,
and then
no,
it's
I'm
out.
just sort of still trying to understand what
Our role in it,
what
yeah,
our prerogative is
It's
in
just
this.
kind of another rubber stamp. I think also just checking in with the community.
yeah. I mean, with Colorado Women's College, like, you know, maybe it wouldn't have been the case that people would have known that Watley Chapel was right outside the boundary. And to have a chance for local people who hopefully know the area better to say, hey, this is actually like important. Why is this being left out? That sort of thing. That's good.
Okay. It's just another check in with the community. Another way we can relate it to the process.
All right. So who's gonna make the motion? I
think
think we're all
George
on the
should.
same page. I think George should.
I'll make it.
Thank you, Larry.
Madam Chair, I move to recommend that the National Register nomination for the 655 Broadway building at 655 North Broadway be forwarded to the keeper of the National Register of Historic Places for presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report.
Thanks, Larry. Second. Thank you, Erica. All right. I'll put it out. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same. Great. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, so that's the end of our agenda today. No discussion items or anything else?
I just wanted to remind the commission that we have a retreat in 3 weeks. It's from 9 till 3. We will be providing a lunch. You should have received an invite from me. If you didn't, let me know. And then you should also be receiving a menu from Emma. I think she had some issues, so if you didn't receive that, also let me know.
Yeah, and I think she requested orders. Maybe this was for something else, but then. Yeah.
I don't know, I didn't pay that much attention.
If you didn't get the email, let someone know.
Let me know.
Okay, so 3:55, and I'll go ahead and close the meeting.